Net importer, consumer surpluses, is a bigger area than producer surplus. Just the opposite, obviously, for an exporter. So the consumer surplus is going to go up by more than the producer surplus is going to go down. And what you're left with is a terms of trade gain. Yes? Why is this area the terms of trade loss? Okay, so we have, remember what the terms of trade are. So let's see. Okay, so that's our terms of trade loss area, EFGHI. So the terms of trade are the price of our exports divided by the price of our imports. So import prices haven't changed. Where we measure the price of our exports and the price of our imports is on the world market. It's always the world price. It's not the tariff-ridden price. It's not the export subsidy-ridden price, which would be TXS. Those turn out to be internal prices. So remember, this firm is receiving PXS when he sells a product abroad, or actually when he sells it domestically as well. How much is the customer abroad paying? How much is a cotton importer actually paying for this product, a bale? PW1, right? The importer is only going to pay the world price. The difference is being made up by the export subsidy, by the government. So the world price has fallen, and that means that we have a terms of trade loss, because this is our export good. Okay? Okay. Notice. Export subsidies, unambiguously a net loss in domestic economic welfare. Notice that that is the case regardless of whether you're a small country or a large country. Export subsidies reduce domestic national economic welfare. I'm sure you can. Oh, you want me to? What, would you like to come up and maybe? Let's see. Okay, that's all I know. So you have to help me here. Okay, so we're going to talk about the import country. With a foreign export subsidy. I guess if I show you this, I can't put it on the problem set, can I? Darn. Okay, so well, I suppose we need supply and demand curves. So what do we know about the autarky price for an importing country? High, right? So that means that the supply and demand curves have to have an intersection point that's relatively high. So let's just assume that's what our autarky price was. Now remember, we started in free trade before the export subsidy was put in. So we also need our free trade price. So this is our original world price. And I would say the domestic quantity demanded would be S naught. The domestic quantity, supplied would be S naught. Demand would be D naught. D naught. And this would be the volume of imports that we would have. Okay? So that would be the pre-export, foreign export subsidy position that we would be in. Now we want to ask ourselves, okay, that big nasty country puts on an export subsidy. It's a large country, so it influences the world price. If it's a small country, we don't care, right, because the price doesn't change. So, but if it's a large country, we know that, and have seen, that the world price will fall to PW1. And because of that, domestic quantity supplied will be reduced. Producers have less incentive to produce, and domestic quantity demanded will increase. And therefore, the country will increase the volume of its imports. Now we know that that has to happen because the export subsidy is increasing the volume of exports, and it has to be matched by increasing the volume of imports, and the only way you're going to get us to buy more is to lower the price. So all of these then are the price effects. So now though, let's look at the welfare effects, right? So here's these various areas. So again, we want to find the changes in. So in the importing country, notice that consumers are much better off, right? I get to buy cotton or whatever it is, solar panels in the US, at a lower price. So consumers receive a gain in consumer surplus of A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, and D. Producers, facing a lower price, are worse off, so they lose area A. And the government has no change in anything because there's no expenditures or tariff revenues going on. So our net effect then on welfare would be plus B, plus C, plus D. So D and B are our production and consumption distortions, and C is our terms of trade. Actually, that's not quite right. Okay, I did not do that correctly. Hold on just a second. Let me. Okay, let's take this out. How can I do that? How can I do this? Yes. Exactly. So for the importing country, we have to take into consideration that we have this expansion of demand and a contraction in supply. So that the total terms of trade, so if we do that then, and I, let's see, this is why I put them on problem sets rather than do them on the fly in classes, because I never remember how to do all of them. Okay, so let's see here. Let's, come on, what's wrong? So let's come back here, see what we've got. So let's see, the way we've got this set up now, consumer surplus increases by A plus B plus C plus D plus E. And producer surplus is minus A minus, oh, wait a minute, E. Let me talk about this on Tuesday. I'm sorry? No, we don't. Oh, we need to. We'll come back on Tuesday. Actually, that is a good question, because this is a bit more involved, right? Because you've got this expansion here, so we have to calculate the areas that are taking place. In essence, what and the thing that I knew was incorrect as soon as I had done the original numbers, the production-consumption distortions can't be positive, right? That's why we call them distortions. If they're deadweight losses, they have to have minus signs in front of them. Now, it also turns out, by the way, just as a point of elucidation, as long as your supply and demand curves are straight lines, which we've always done, area B and area E are exactly the same size. Similarly, D and F are exactly the same size, and that will come into the way. I will have a renewed solution for you on Tuesday morning, or Tuesday afternoon. Okay, now, the only problem is this thing won't save this slide. Okay, that doesn't matter. Okay, so what we can say, though, is what we can clearly say, however, is that the importing country's economic welfare will improve. If somebody's going to give you a subsidy, I mean, it's going to subsidize the production of their product or the exports of their product, and it lowers the price to you as a net buyer of that product, then you will definitely be better off. So again, we'll revisit that issue first thing on Tuesday, and I'll try to actually have it worked out. Okay, so if an export subsidy is unambiguously negative for a country that imposes the subsidy or uses a subsidy, then it might make sense that if you wanted to increase national economic welfare, rather than a subsidy, you should use an export tax. Think about that. How often would we think about a tax as improving national economic welfare? Now, export taxes are interesting. During the debate to adopt the U.S. Constitution, actually during the debate when the U.S. Constitution was being drafted, there was concerns about how the new national government was actually going to be funded. So for those of you who don't know anything or very much about American constitutional history or have forgotten everything that you ever knew, just a brief little history lesson. So after the Revolutionary War, when the United States became an independent country, we set up a new government under something known as the Articles of Confederation. And so the country wasn't actually, the various states, the 13 states, where it was not actually a country. There's a reason it's called the United States, plural, thinking about all of the states as being united. But under the Articles of Confederation, that was not the case. And the central government, in order to fund itself, had to request money from the various states, who could, if they wanted, send them money. But if they didn't want or couldn't, didn't have to. And there was no way of enforcing those payments. That meant really shaky finances during the Revolutionary War and very, very shaky finances after the Revolutionary War and before the adoption of the Constitution. So the writers of the Constitution knew that one of the things that they had to do was to make sure that the new federal government, the national government, actually had an independent source of income. It was very easy to agree that they would tax imports. We were still mad at the British. Most of our imports were coming from Britain. We wanted to think about infant industries and getting new industries started. So there was a lot of discussion about tariffs. And that was pretty quickly agreed to. However, the southern states did not like tariffs. They didn't like them because they had no manufacturing industry of their own. They either had to buy manufactured goods from England or France with a tariff imposed, or they had to buy them from New England factories who had a comparative disadvantage in producing these things, so the prices were really high. So the southerners were big exporters, and what they were big exporters of was primarily cotton and tobacco. And they were worried that the northern folks, in order to give the new national government more revenue, would start to tax exports as well. So there is an explicit clause in the U.S. Constitution that prohibits taxes on exports. As far as I know, we're the only country that has that explicitly in their constitution. So we don't ever do it, because we can't. But other countries have used export taxes. Russia, this year, Russia's been going through a drought and had all sorts of really weird weather problems. And their wheat crop basically failed. Now, Russia turns out to be a huge exporter of wheat. However, one of the things that many countries who export food products have discovered is that when you have droughts or crop failures for one reason or another, that the price of food goes shooting way up. And if you continue to export in the same volumes that you were exporting before, your domestic price of those food products would rise even further. So one way that countries have used to limit how much food prices might rise would be to put on an export tax. We know that when you tax something, you get less of it. So the whole idea is let's put a tax on food exports. We'll export less food. That'll keep more food in the country domestically and keep the domestic price lower. In 2007 and 2008, we had widespread droughts, flooding, all sorts of weird weather, significant damage to lots of agricultural crops, particularly in South and Southeast Asia and Australia. and food prices shot way up, and there was all sorts of concerns. During that period of time, India, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia all put export taxes on rice exports. Didn't make rice importers very happy, but all the major rice exporters put on export taxes to limit the volume of their exports leaving the country. Indonesia still has an export tax on palm oil, which is actually, you probably figured out, it's oil comes from palms, but it's used for cooking purposes, and it's a basic fuel, and so when it's in short supply, it causes all sorts of problems. Well, an export tax, again, can be either an ad valorem tax or a specific tax. We can have large countries, we can have small countries, so we'll take the two cases. So let's suppose that we have a small country with a specific export tax. So here, notice that the business firms, are going to be taxed on anything that they export. So right now we're exporting X naught. Well, you can imagine, if you're going to tax something, we'll get less of it. So the whole idea is to reduce the volume of exports. So let's just suppose that exports fall to X1 because of this tax. So what will happen with that tax is that the domestic price will fall. Okay? So remember what's happening here. We're not taxing the production or the sale of this product. We're only taxing the exports of the product. So it's exports that are going to be reduced. And again, if we're producing less, if we're selling less in the foreign market, there'll be more available in the domestic market, and that will drive the price down. So again, an export tax in a small country will reduce the domestic price of the product, which will increase the domestic quantity demanded, reduce the domestic quantity supplied, and therefore reduce the exports, which was the whole intent anyway. The intent was really, let's reduce exports so that the domestic price comes down, or at least doesn't rise as much as it might otherwise. Okay? And of course, being a small country, there are no welfare effects. No price effects. So we can think about the changes in consumer surplus, right? So consumers here are better off by A and B. Producers are worse off by what? A, B, C, D, E. What E? The other E. E. In government revenue, revenue, gosh, I can't write here, will be what? D, right? So it's a tax, so we still get the tax rate on the lower volume of exports that we have. So what's the net here? Minus C minus E, which we call consumption and production distortions. Oh, God, I'm so tired of those guys. They just won't go away. So notice, whenever you have a government policy that changes the price, you are going to change production and consumption decisions, so you will always have deadweight losses, efficiency losses, and production and consumption distortions, all of which are exactly the same thing. Okay? So that's what happens in a small country. Whoops, so what do we see here? Still a net loss. A net loss. Well, wait a minute. If an export subsidy is going to give you a net loss, shouldn't an export tax give you a net gain? Didn't work out that way. Redistribution of income, no effects on world prices or world welfare. Now let's think about the large country. Again, we can go through the same exercise. We know what's going to happen in the export country. The export tax will drive the domestic price down, reducing the volume of exports. Giving us a lower volume of trade, and if we have a lower volume of exports, we also have to have a lower volume of imports to get foreign consumers to buy less. We need to raise the price, and that higher price in the import countries will reduce domestic demand in the importer, increase